Hi, I'm Bill Nemitz, and welcome to another edition of Born to Run, our series of podcasts with gubernatorial candidates who will be on the June primary ballot. Our guest today is Adam Cote, Democrat, running for governor. Adam, welcome.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you. The purpose of this, as we've explained, is to step away from the politics and talk a little bit about life stories. And having known you for some time, I know you have quite a life story, but there's a lot of ground to cover here. Let's go back to the beginning, though. You are a son of Sanford, if ever there was one.
Yes, I am. Born and raised.
And it's a town that has certainly had its ups and downs, maybe more downs than ups. And you grew up in that. Describe Sanford when you arrived in this world.
Well, I grew up in the early years in the 70s. I think my early memories, I was born in 73. My dad was a teacher at Sanford High. So I remember I was the bat boy, the water boy, everything going.
He was also a renowned coach.
Yeah. He's a teacher and a coach. And my mom was always very active in the community in Sanford. She worked with kids with disabilities. She was involved in all sorts of organizations. So I remember I thought I had the best childhood. I really did. My grandfather was a Maine guide, and he used to take me hunting and fishing all the time at a young age. My meme worked in the Nassau College. That was open at the time. I live across the street from there now in Springvale. But it closed down when I was 7 or 8 years old. And the economy wasn't as bad then
as it later got.
As it later got. Yeah, I mean we had several times we had to just completely reinvent ourselves, and we used to have a lot of retail stores in downtown, always open. Not so much anymore.
What was describe your family? How many siblings?
I have an older brother, Guy. He's 4 years older than I am. Lots of cousins. My Pepe had 16 brothers and sisters. My Meme had 11. So
wow, yeah, all in many in that area.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sanford, Biddeford, Saco. We feel pretty good about.
You got a cousin on every corner.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, big French family. We would always go to my Meme and Pepe's after church on Sunday and have a big family.
Now, did you go to parochial school? Or public school?
I went to public school.
Okay, and right through the whole Sanford school
it was funny because my older brother Guy, started out at parochial school, and the joke in the family, I don't know how much it's true, but the nuns used to give him cookies to have him quiet because he used to cry all the time. He didn't like it there, so he only lasted a couple of weeks, and they didn't put me there. So public schools all the way through.
And athletics was a big part of your.
It was, yeah. My dad was a really good athlete in Sanford, and he's in the New England Basketball Hall of Fame as a coach and an athlete. And so I grew up football, basketball, baseball.
What was it like? And you played on the high school teams. Your dad coached you, I assume?
He coached me in baseball.
What was it like having your dad for a coach? Was it an advantage, especially a legendary coach?
Yeah.
Was that hard?
No, it actually wasn't, because he had such a good reputation that everyone wanted their kids to play for my dad. It's still like that. He hasn't been coaching for years, and everyone around town calls him coach. And so it wasn't hard. My dad is really, he's one of those types of people in town that everyone just respects and knows. He would be the person that if he got up in a town meeting and said something, people would listen and quiet down, see what he had to say, and just a really, really good guy. I honestly joked that I didn't know I was poor till I got to Colby, because I felt kind of like a little bit of a celebrity in town because of my dad.
So he's a pivotal figure in your life.
Big time, yeah. A very, very, very respected teacher, coach, one of the pillars of my community growing up.
And then you went off to Colby. Was that just your first, where you wanted to go, or was it one of many? How did you end up at Colby?
I actually had looked into West Point. I didn't end up applying to West Point, but I was looking at it, and then when I found out that I would have to spend 4 years on active duty, I said, "Wow, I'll be 26. I'll be so old by the time I do that." So
little did you know.
Exactly. And I had like everybody, I had a high school girlfriend, and she was going to UMaine Farmington, and I looked into Bates and Colby, and the Colby football coach called me quite a bit, and I went up and did a tour there and went there.
Mm-hmm. Now, Colby was, Waterville's, I guess, a little bit like Sanford, only Sanford doesn't have a Colby. But at what point, you mentioned West Point, even as going back into high schools, at what point did the military become, a major threat in your life?
I've had people in my family say that they always knew I was going to join.
Why so?
I don't know. I had a very, very close connection to my grandfather. My mom's dad, he's from Scarborough. He just died last year, but he was on the first wave of Marines to land on Iwo Jima. He saw the flag getting raised on Mount Suribachi. And I always admired that. I always wanted to be part of something larger than myself. I always wanted to test myself personally. And so when I got out of Colby, I couldn't do ROTC in college because I played football and I played baseball. And the ROTC program, you'd had to do through University of Maine. So I wouldn't have been able to do it. But after I graduated, I enlisted. I went in as a private. Special
National Guard?
Yep. Mm-hmm. No, Army Reserve.
Army Reserve, okay.
And it was funny because I moved to Florida right after college, figure out what I wanted to do, and I walked into a recruiting station with the Marines. And I said, "Hey, I'm from Maine. I'm going to be moving back to Maine probably in another year, but I'd like to join the Marine Reserves." And the recruiter said, "We don't have a recruiting station, a reserve unit north of Maryland," which is not true.
No, there's one in Topsom.
I know.
Right.
There's one in Topsom. Yeah. But that's the reason I joined the Army. I was going to go in the Marines.
Oh, my God. What a different experience you would have had. Huh?
I know. I went next door, and I went into the Army, and they said they had some openings for military police. So I said, "Yeah, I'll do that."
Was that something that clicked instantly for you? I mean, some people, it takes them a while to get used to the military mindset. Or was it, having seen you in that environment, I get the feeling that it was kind of a natural fit.
Parts of it, I didn't have a hard time dealing with the physical part of it, or the getting up early, or the being in the woods. I felt very comfortable in that space. The part I had a hard time with as soon as I joined was the sense that you're only as strong as your weakest link, and being held responsible because somebody else didn't do this or to do that was new to me. I grew up playing sports, but always on good teams where you developed people through working together.
And if somebody screwed up on a team, the coach pulls them out and puts someone else in, right?
Yeah. But in the military, you don't really get to choose everybody that's there. And I learned that quickly in basic training because I went to basic training when I was 23, and a lot of these guys were 18, 19 years old, entirely different level of maturity. And I was placed in charge of a lot of them. And that was an adjustment to be placed in charge of people. And I really had to learn to create a team and deal with the hand you're dealt, so to speak.
So your military career, even then, I'm sure you had no idea how broad it would be. Your first deployment was to Bosnia. Was that with the Guard, or was that with the...
That was when I was, when I joined in Florida, they attach you to a unit that's closest to your address. And I was living with my brother at the time in Tampa or St. Pete, Clearwater area. So they attached me to a unit in Tampa. I went to basic training. I got out in August of 97, and the unit that they'd attached me to got activated that same month to go to Bosnia.
Lucky you.
I was immediately, even though I was a reservist, I spent a year and a half on active duty. Right
during a pretty hot time over there.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on. That was when a lot of people were being brought to justice for what had happened over there. And then, of course, you had your deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. You have a campaign ad up right now, in fact, that focuses on the experience in Iraq. I happen to have been there with you at the time, embedded with the 133rd. Tell us about that and how pivotal or how life-changing an experience that was.
All of it. The highs and the lows of the Iraq deployment in particular, because we were the largest activation of Maine troops since World War II. So this was big news here in Maine. It was a really bad, not that there's ever a great time to be in Iraq, but things were really heating up, as you know.
This was 2004,
yeah,
right?
2004, 2005. And there were highs in the fact that I really believe that we did some great things out there, building infrastructure, schools, medical clinics, the roads, the Adopt an Iraqi Village program, which I was able to put together. A lot of these things were very rewarding, that I felt we were really doing important stuff. The fact that we took casualties, the fact that people got killed, and then frankly to see afterwards so many of the places that we'd spent so much time working on got taken over by ISIS. And so there's, I guess, mixed feelings on it, but it was a hard year. It was just a really, really hard year. And I mentioned my grandfather earlier. I remember when I came back from Iraq, I'd spent a year out there. I'd had friends killed out there, missed the birth of my daughter when I was out there. So many really big events in my life. And I came back, I was having a hard time adjusting when I first got back. And my grandfather.
In what way? I mean, how did that manifest itself?
Well, Paulina and I I was gone for a year. And the day I left, she found out she was pregnant. So I got home to a 5-month-old daughter. We were at odds with each other, and we were talking about going to marriage counseling. It was just like adjusting when you spend a year away. You spend so much time over there having expectations of what your life is going to be like when you get back. And then you get back, and it isn't that way. Life has gone on when you were away. And also just the sense of urgency that everything has out there. I was constantly petrified that something I did or didn't do would have somebody get killed. And that the stakes
couldn't be higher.
Yeah, and I knew that I'll do others. I don't know what I'd end up doing in my life, but you know what? This is something that if it goes wrong, never leaves you. And I knew that. I was very aware of that the whole year. That's why I put so much energy into everything I did out there. The convoys, the projects, the double, triple checking, making sure we're doing everything we can, and planning and over planning. Became a constant to me. And then I came back, and it's like, oh, okay, go back to practicing law and trying to find a sense of importance to a memo that you can do or something. It was just you go from an environment where it's life and death back to an environment where people are complaining about their dental plans, and you just feel like
something that a lot of vets continue to struggle with to this day.
Yep.
Although life went on for you, it was one more tour to Afghanistan. Saw you there as well, and different challenge. You basically were handed what was a very dysfunctional company of soldiers.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Afghanistan deployment was different in the sense that it wasn't as dangerous for me personally as Iraq was, because I was at a higher rank and I was more in a leadership role, and I commanded a company from Maine that, frankly, everything was going really well. A lot of us had served together. We had a really strong unit. We spent a lot of time putting everyone together, and there was another unit in the battalion and on the base where they had major dysfunction. They had charges of sexual harassment, of racism. They had soldiers mailing things home they'd stolen. They'd established a fight club, which I think you saw a little bit about. They made the mistake of videotaping it, and the brigade commander on base got a hold of it, court-martialed, reassigned, or sent home the entire chain of command, about 20 soldiers.
Left them completely leaderless.
Exactly.
And your job was to come in and...
he chose me as the commander to go in and try and turn it around, and we did. There were some really good soldiers in there. I was able to bring in a couple more in key leadership positions, and we worked our butts off. We turned around not only the morale, but got people feeling like they had some skin in the game, and you know this, Bill, but it's a common, I think, misconception of people who don't understand the military culture, that they think it's one person with the highest rank walking in and yelling at everybody, and that's not it at all. It's a test of leadership when you're going out there, particularly in a combat zone, trying to turn around a unit where none of these folks know you. It was hard. Yeah. But we're able to do it.
Big threshold to get over.
Yeah.
So through it all, you've mentioned Paulina, your wife, already once. You mentioned your first daughter, right?
Yeah.
Being born in 2004, where there was one, now there are 5. Let's back up a bit. Tell me how you met Paulina.
I met her in Florida. I was actually in a play when I was down in Tampa living with my brother, and the director had cast me in a show, and she said, I cast this other woman in my next show and I want to introduce you. And so she introduced us, and that's how I met her.
And the ground moved.
Exactly.
And the spotlight came on.
Yeah.
And you now, as I said, you have 5 children.
Yeah.
Which is enough to make some people hit their forehead and say 5. Tell us about your kids.
Well, the girls are 13, 12, and 10, and the boys are 8 and 6. All great kids. They're all in Sanford schools, active in everything from sports to theater and dance and music, and good students. We legitimately have a lot of blessings. Our family really enjoys being together, and we get cranky when we're not around. We just have times where it's just the 7 of us, but we'll go hiking all the time. We'll spend lots of time together, and we've been afraid forever, saying, "Wow, when they get a little bit older, they're not going to want to do that." When they get a little bit older, and so far, Anna's 13 and still likes to
hanging out, huh?
Yeah, and they're doing really well. I mean, they're just good kids.
Yeah. That must be tough right now, because obviously, it must be tough during your deployments too, I imagine, because not having you there is not only it's hard on you, I assume it's hard on them too. It leaves a lot to your wife, as any military or political wife
I married
can attest.
I did, and back to the deployment piece. For me, whenever I get asked, like, what was the hardest deployment, Afghanistan far and away, because we had 5 young kids at home. Mm-hmm. The kids were between the ages of 1 and 9. I missed a year of birthdays. I missed a year of holidays, school. It was an awful year.
It's not so much what was going on over there as to what was going on.
And Paulina kept it together. I mean, she's really a remarkable woman. So
do your kids look at Sanford now? Because Sanford's all due respect, it's one of those towns that kind of takes it on the chin. Mm-hmm. In terms of how, not necessarily how it is, but how it's perceived. It's kind of out there in western York County and overlooked by a lot of people.
Yeah.
People tend to lump it in with the classic, stereotypical dying mill town. Mm-hmm. Yet you're raising 5 kids there. Do they have the same perception of Sanford growing up that you did?
I think they do. And a lot of it, if you remember when you asked me, it took me a while to start talking about retail stores and downtowns. I was mostly talking about the culture I grew up in. We had, and it's the same for our kids, we had some really good families down there, raising really good families. We have more problems now than when I was a kid. We have over 70% of our kids in most of our schools on free and reduced lunch, and the economy has slid backwards. But it's a great community to raise a family. People are involved. They coach Little League and kids sports teams and do community theater and all of these types of things that you like to see out of engaged community. Mm-hmm. So it is a good place, and they've enjoyed it. I do wish there was more opportunity. That was part of when Pauline and I talked about this. We're seeing that generation right above us where their kids are getting out of high school or they're getting out of college, and they want them to stay in their hometown, but they also want them to have a lot of opportunity in most parts of the state.
It's still early for your kids,
Yeah.
but do they talk about that? Do you ever hear them mentioning, as they look way down the road, I want to do this, I want to do that? Do those dreams take them out of Maine?
Well, when you're at the ages they're at, their dreams change every week.
Right.
So far,
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Some of them do. I mean, Audrey wants to be an international documentarian. She wants to.
That's going to take her out of Maine.
I think that would take her out of Sanford for a little while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's certainly our hope. We want, because we do have a very close family, we want to all be around each other as we get older. You know.
One thing, I'm going to close this with one question, and that is one thing I always noticed about you, and you talk about being thankful, for everything that you have and what you've acquired both, personally and in a lot of other ways over the years. I always noticed whenever I was embedded with a unit you were in over in Iraq or Afghanistan, that unlike virtually everyone else in the mess hall, when you go in for chow, you would always sit down and very quietly say a prayer.
Yeah.
And I, honest to God, over 5 embeds, I never saw another soldier do that.
No kidding.
No.
Huh.
And it always struck me that in that environment, I don't know, it's kind of a brave thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But explain that, because I think it points toward a side of you that is very quiet, but also very powerful. It's this whole kind of, spiritual sense, religious sense.
Yeah, I have a strong Christian faith, and I always have. I wouldn't say that I'm somebody that talks about it very much, but it's a big part of who I am. My mom, I really got a lot of that from my mom. My mom was very active with both my brother and I in that sense, and it, I think, grounded us, and we do the same thing with our kids too. But yeah, it's helped me through very difficult times, not only in the military, but other things in life, ground me and help me know who I am, to make right decisions, and feel comfortable that regardless of what happens, I'll be all right, I guess. I don't know. I've never been asked the question.
Well, you got a lot to pray for now, don't you?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, we're at the end of this. Hey, it's been great connecting with you again, Adam.
Thanks.
The race continues. It's going to be a sprint here until June, but we appreciate you coming in to talk with us, and good luck going forward.
Thanks for having me.
Adam Cote, Democratic candidate for governor. I'm Bill Nemitz, and this has been another edition of Born to Run. You can find this and the other gubernatorial podcasts at pressherald.com.